that love's young dream never comes true. To prove that even wise men can be wrong, I concentrate on you.
Mr. Mark DeMint, ladies and gentlemen, Mark DeMint. It's the Veterans Radio Hour. Brought to you by Dallas Corporation for all your corporate printing needs. And by GIM Productions, creating internet solutions. Websites can do that. Now, stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Hour is next on the Veterans Radio Network.
Tango Charlie Bravo, you're a go for the Veterans Hour.
Welcome, one and all, to the Veterans Radio Hour. It's our tribute to all of those who served our great nation's armed forces, past and present, and their tremendous accounts of heroic duty and bravery. With your host, Brigadier General Dave Grange. And now, coming to you live from our Veterans Center studio, here is General Dave.
Yep, and here we are. Once again, it's the Veterans Radio Hour. I'm glad to be back. I was in Vegas for the National Association of Broadcasters last week. I want to thank all the guys that were here doing the job for me. It turned out to be really good. And now tonight, we're going to be doing a show about CIRSE. And I know a lot of you are saying, okay, what's a CIRSE? It's the Center for Education and Reconciliation in Southeast Asia. That's going to get to be very unique. It has a lot to do with Vietnam. With everything going on today, Vietnam, Iraq, let's see. A lot of people have been making those comparisons. Let's find out what kind of comparisons actually really do exist. But let's find out, first of all, what reconciliation is about and how the education works. Joining us will be Dr. James Brask and Dr. Robert Arnott from Barrett College, DePaul University. They are both directors, associate directors of CIRSE. They're going to help us understand it more. And then an associate from Northern Illinois University, Dr. Larry Johansson. Or is it Johansson? Johansson. You get that mic a little closer to you and we'll get it moving further. They're going to all be talking with us. And I've also got a co-host with me tonight, radio personality, and we're glad he's here with us, Kevin Matthews from WCKG in Chicago. Thank you for coming.
Guys, thank you very much. Pleasure and honor to be here.
It's going to be a really good show. Those of you who want to call in, 866-928-2329. That is a free call. Give us a call. You also know that's a chat room we've got happening. VeteransRadioHour.com. We'll be there with you as well. I've got to start the show out as we usually do with our great dedication. And tonight we're going to dedicate it to Captain Christopher Seifert. He was 28 years old. He was with the 1st Brigade Headquarters, 101st Airborne Division. He, unfortunately, was the one killed in that tent when a treacherous soldier threw a grenade which caused an explosion that ripped through the tent occupied by members of the brigade's headquarters staff. Seifert was an infantry platoon leader, an airborne school and basic infantry course graduate. He was a man of honor. He's a man that we'll all miss. We dedicate this show tonight to Captain Christopher Seifert, 101st Airborne.
You're tuned to the Veterans Radio Hour with retired General Dave Grange, coming to you from the Veterans Center studio. And now, back to the show.
And as you can probably tell, General Dave is still with CNN. He's on his TDY tour. Going to be signing in tonight, I think, with Wolf Blitzer once again. If we're lucky, maybe we'll get a phone call in from him as well, since he did a stint in Vietnam. And I'm going to start the show off tonight on Cersei, getting probably the explanation from, I guess, the man who really founded it and who is the director of it, James Brask. Dr. James, why don't you tell us a little bit?
Well, the idea for Cersei really came about as a consequence of teaching a course at the university with Bob Arnold. We taught a course on the politics and history of the Vietnam War. And through the process of teaching this course on, on the Vietnam War, we gradually recognized that we were dealing with our own reconciliation with what happened to us during the war.
And explain that means you are no doubt a Vietnam vet.
Well, yeah, both of us are Vietnam vets, and I think the course has been a revelation for a lot of students who have taken it, because as we tell them when they first come into the course, they actually have 4 teachers. I am a political scientist, Bob is a historian, but I'm a veteran, Bob's a veteran. Sometimes he speaks as a veteran, sometimes I speak as a veteran, sometimes he's an academic. So it can get kind of confusing because you got 4 personalities. And I think that dynamic of the interaction between the students and ourselves really led to some revelations about personal trust, about personal growth, personal reconciliation. And it was really, the center was an outgrowth out of the teaching experience.
And how did Larry then end up fitting in?
Well, Larry actually is now at Northern Illinois University, and at the time he was teaching at Barrett College of DePaul University, and the 3 of us had actually taught a graduate level course on the politics, history, and literature of the Vietnam War. Larry's specialty is the literature of the Vietnam War, and he can address that very, very well. So we have a very, very close working relationship, and Larry we invited to be on the advisory board of Cersei. And so he's given us the virtue of his advice about what direction we should take.
And is the center an actual building structured
Not
center?
yet. We're still in the planning stages. We had a fundraiser that just took place about, about a week ago. And we're creating interest in it. We have a lot of plans. We need a lot of financial support. We are in a process, we'll talk about it later on, I hope, but we're in the process of trying to make a documentary film.
Yeah, for sure we're going to be bringing that up, because I know we have the director and the idea maker of that film. I think it's called Teaching Vietnam. But we'll definitely get back into that a little later. Dr. Bob, what about, I know you're almost a doctor, you told me, but
almost.
Yeah, you got your thesis in, and so I'm going to just give you the credit already, you know.
You're a good man.
I give you the holy sign already.
I appreciate it.
Good. Just let me know, though, you really got students taking this course?
Last count for the course that we're teaching this quarter, we have 35. 35 registered.
And how often have you taught this course, or how long has it been going?
Jim and I started teaching it together in '93, and we've taught it every year since then, with a couple extra times the graduate level course that we taught with Larry, and we taught it one summer for kids who can't take it in the spring.
Mm-hmm. Well, I noticed that being that it's a formation of a center, that you recently had a grand opening with a wonderful display of photography from a couple great photographers that I've gotten to meet. And we're going to get into how that opening was, and I'm going to bring on Kevin Matthews with me just when we get back from this little bit of a break that we're going to take. Stick with us. We're going to be talking about the Center for Education and Reconciliation of Southeast Asia on the Veterans Radio Hour.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network.
This is the Veterans Radio Hour. We're here every Sunday evening between 8 and 10 p.m. Central Time, and we're happy to welcome you again this evening to our 32nd show. The program tonight deals with the topic of the Vietnam experience, education and reconciliation about the Vietnam experience. Was it a war or was it a conflict? These are the subjects that will be discussed this evening. We have a very distinguished panel this evening, and I'll tell you in just a moment who the members of that panel are. All of the panel members this evening are connected with CERSI, which is the Center for Education and Reconciliation in Southeast Asia. CERSI is an educational project dedicated to fostering multicultural understanding of the nations in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim, and the historical relationship of the United States with those nations. The center specifically promotes the process of reconciliation and development of peaceful relations by emphasizing the role of education in creating possibilities for mutual understanding and cooperation. The center promotes educational activities which contribute toward personal, interpersonal, and state-to-state reconciliation. So stay with us here. We'll be coming back on the air very shortly. It's a 2-hour program, so there's a lot in store for you right here on the Veterans Radio Hour, as there is every week. You know, we began back in September, and we've had so many interesting programs. We've had a lot of internet activity, a lot of chat room activity, phone calls, and so forth. And we encourage you to call in if you do have a question that you would like to pose to any of our panel members. Call 866-928-2329. That's 866-928-2329. It's a toll-free call. We'd love to hear from you, or you can send in a question right on the right over the internet. Check out the discussion board right here in the Veterans Radio Hour website. Very briefly, our sponsors are Dallas Corporation for all your printing needs, GIM Productions, websites can do that, and Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer, as they say, PB Army ASAP. If you'd like details about sponsoring the program or becoming a founder, you can reach us here, 800-521-0020. Stay with us.
The Veterans Radio Show is clear for a landing. Let's resume our broadcast from the Veterans Center Studio.
The Veterans Hour proudly presents our military hero's story of valor.
This evening's story is that of Private First Class U.S. Army Company A 2nd Battalion of the 503rd Infantry, part of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, PFC Carlos James Lozada, who distinguished himself at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty in the Battle of Dak To, Vietnam. While serving as a machine gunner with 1st Platoon Company A, Carlos was part of a 4-man early warning outpost located 35 meters from his company's lines. At 1400 hours, a Vietnamese Army company rapidly approaching, PFC Lozada alerted his comrades and commenced firing at the enemy who were within 10 meters of the outpost. His heavy and accurate fire killed at least 20 North Vietnamese soldiers and completely disrupted their initial attack. The enemy continued their assault, attempting to envelop the outpost. At the same time, enemy forces launched a heavy attack on the forward west flank of Company A with the intent to cut them off from their battalion. Company A was given the order to withdraw. PFC Lozada apparently realized that if he abandoned his position, there would be nothing to hold back the surging North Vietnamese soldiers, and that the entire company withdrawal would be jeopardized. He called for his comrades to move back, and he would stay and provide cover for them. He made this decision realizing that the enemy was converging on 3 sides of his position and only meters away, and a delay in withdrawal meant almost certain death. PFC Lozada continued to deliver a heavy, accurate volume of suppressive fire against the enemy until he was mortally wounded and had to be carried during the withdrawal. His heroic deed served as an example and an inspiration to his comrades throughout the ensuing 4-day battle. PFC Lozada's actions are in the highest traditions of the U.S. Army and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the U.S. Army. Carlos James Lozada was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor posthumously.
You're listening to the Veterans Hour with retired Brigadier General Dave Grange. And now, back to the broadcast.
And this is Kennedy Camp. General Dave couldn't be with us tonight. Instead, I'm being joined by Kevin Matthews, WCKG radio personality, 105.9 FM here in Chicago. And we're talking with members of CERSI, a organization that's devoted to the education and reconciliation of Southeast Asia. I think we got some questions for them, don't we, Kevin?
What's the reception like on campus to the students participating or signing up for the class?
Well, the class itself has a lot to do with a lot of things other than CERSI. A lot of people are taking the class because they've heard about it, and then they're kind of getting brought into the CERSI structure through the class. Our job in the center is to build the ideas of reconciliation with the people of Southeast Asia. The class is a entree to that, as well as bringing general knowledge of the war and the political and educational circumstances around it to everyone. We get a lot of people coming to the class too who aren't signed up for it. People who hear about it and they come in and they lend an hour or two, and we listen in with them, and we talk to them, and we're broadening out these ideas that reconciliation after the war is something that we want to leave our kids with and our country with.
Hey, Bob, I'm sorry, could I add something to that?
No, you bet.
Having taught the course both at that campus, and I'm teaching a course in literature of the Vietnam War at Northern Illinois right now, one of the reasons why students take courses like this is they come to get answered to some of the questions they have. Many of them are children of Vietnam veterans, or their fathers they had relatives that were killed in Vietnam. So many of them, and their parents won't talk about the war. They take the class because they want to understand. I've had students tell me, I'm here because I'm trying to understand what happened to my dad, why he is the way he is. And that's part of the reconciliation. That's part of why all three of us and others like us push to have courses like this to help bring about a healing from some of the wounds from this war.
Anything like this anywhere else in the country?
Oh yeah, there's some other places, but I'm not sure that it's quite as strong other places as it is here.
Chicago has roughly 250,000 veterans of the Vietnam era in the military, and that's an awful lot of children when you look at it. And we get constant, every course that I teach at Barrett College or at the other colleges that I've taught at over the years, whenever we get into it about Vietnam in the context, I ask any of you have any relatives who are vets. There's always a significant number, more than 10, maybe 20% of the class will have veteran relatives. And none of them, or a very small number of them, talk about it because they look at their kids and they see the children they were, not the adults they're becoming. And we give, if nothing else, the kids, maybe we give them the questions to ask their parents that they couldn't ask as children.
I have the Kevin Matthews Claus Foundation. One of the first things that we wanted to do is I work with a gentleman, his name is Bob Kaufman. His grandfather lost his hearing in the Civil War, and what kind of impact that had coming right up through the family tree and whatnot. And I know that my father, he flew B-17s in World War II, and my dad would never talk about World War II. My uncle was a Marine Raider. He never talked about the Marines. I have my brother-in-law Stan was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. My other brother-in-law Mike, he served in Vietnam. And these people are these men, and I love these. They're my family, and I want to know more because that did impact my life and even my children. You know, my son who's turned 18 or my daughter who's 14, they want to know because it has impacted the family. So with our foundation, what we're trying to do now is create an environment, and the class sounds like it's pretty close to what we do too, where it's a talking time for the first time.
I think that's really an excellent point, because one of the things we actually do in class is we talk about memory. We talk about oral history. And we talk about finding out in your family, the military units your relative serves with, to copy that stuff down and pass it down to your kids, to get military records, even if they haven't served in a war, were they in the civil rights movement, that it's really important to know your personal family history.
Well, James Brask, professor and director of the CERSI, tell us about who were you in Vietnam? What were you? How long? What was it about?
I was drafted. I was drafted after 2 years of college. I didn't do that well in college until I did my military service and came back. I was drafted, did 4 months of training, and I was in Vietnam. I guess I was in Vietnam 2 months after my brother arrived home from Vietnam. My brother had served 13 months with the Marine Corps. I was there from January to July of 1970, was wounded in a helicopter that was shot down. I was in the hospital from July of 70 until March of 71.
Which hospital?
I spent 3 days in Vietnam, 12 days in Japan, and the rest of the time at Great Lakes Naval Hospital.
Okay, Zama?
Yeah, geez, yeah.
I was in Zama for a year.
Were you really?
Yeah, I ran the orthopedic clinic there. I was the first PA to do orthopedic surgery, and I was in and out of Nam picking up people, but you weren't my year. I was 69, so you were a little earlier. Bob, what about you? Tell us about your Vietnam experience.
I enlisted in April of 65, went on active duty in June, volunteered for everything that was put in front of me. Couldn't bring myself to jump out of a perfectly good airplane, but everything else that came along, I volunteered for it. Ended up with the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry in the 1st Cavalry Division from November 65 to May of 67. I was a company clerk in Charlie Company, carried the 1st Sergeant's radio, and then worked at battalion headquarters and did all kinds of stuff. Ended up as a briefing NCO for 3rd Brigade of the 1st Cav right before I extended for 6 months. And should have probably done that again, but that's water under the bridge. And so I was there for 18 months.
In November 65, so are you talking we were soldiers?
I joined the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry during the battle in the Ia Drang. There were 10 of us replacements. They couldn't get us into X-ray, so we spent the night, the first couple nights along the airstrip at An-Khe, and then waited for the battalion to come back from Camp Holloway after the fighting. And that was a remarkable 6 to 8 weeks. There's a book in me on that.
I'm sure.
I got to get to that.
That's the next part after your doctors. Okay,
Yes.
And Larry, why don't you tell us?
I was 17 years old and was not doing very well in high school. And so this is 1964, summer of 64. It was the summer of Beach Boys and California Girls. And a buddy of mine thought the really great way to get out to Southern California was to join the Marines. So we did. And in boot camp one day, and the DI came out and said, well, you're all going to Vietnam. And we looked at each other and said, what's a Vietnam? And so next thing, I thought we were going to an island in the South Pacific. So I shipped out in January of 66 by boat. Went over with the 1st Marine Division. I was assigned to Bravo Company 1st Recon Battalion, which, by the way, is the unit that was created from the Marine Raiders in World War II. And we were somewhat like the Army Special Forces, a little bit like the Navy Frog. We were scuba qualified, went out in small teams in enemy territory. I was there from January 66 through September 67. And was at Chu Lai and then moved up around Da Nang. And just before I came home, we were up around Khe Sanh, did some patrolling up around Khe Sanh. And then when I came back, what's interesting that Bob didn't tell you is both of us were stationed in San Francisco. I was at Marine Barracks, San Francisco. Probably one of the 2 worst places you could be stationed when you came back from Vietnam was San Francisco. That was one of the worst. So we were told, for example, we couldn't wear our uniforms in public.
Same thing with us.
Yeah, very interesting place.
Yeah, the Summer of Love, 1967, wasn't.
And that's where they thought you were going to start becoming educated back into the country and find some reconciliation. And most of us were laughed at or spit on, called names, and
it was more a question of ignorance than spitting, but it was negative all the same.
Exactly. Well, we're going to take a quick break, but I do have to recognize once again in our audience my good friend. I'm so happy he's here, and he always seems to bring his lovely wife with him, Tom Jandanian. There, Tom, how are you? Tom is one of our first show guests. Tom was a POW. He was captured at the Battle of the Bulge by the Nazis, and he was able to make it. He's quite a character. We love having him here, and he brings gifts for people and everything. He's just one of those good guys, and he's always got his lovely wife with him. We've got some other guests we'll be bringing back in just a few moments after this short break.
This is the Veterans Radio Hour. It's our 32nd program, April 13th, 2003. We're happy to have you all listening on the internet throughout the world, as well as on the Information Radio Network. You know, the Veterans Radio Hour is hosted each week by retired Brigadier General Dave Grange, who is not with us, hasn't been with us for the last couple of several weeks. He's on TDY with CNN, but we may be hearing from him a little later. In his absence, Kenny DeCamp, senior producer, is hosting the program tonight, along with Kevin Matthews, who is a well-known radio personality here on WCKG 105.9 FM here in the Chicago area. Join us here each week for a lively and informative roundtable discussion featuring distinguished military and civilian guests. Topics include everything from historical events to contemporary issues of interest to veterans and active service personnel. To read a book or to watch a movie about World War II or the Vietnam War is always interesting, but to hear an interview with an actual participant, such as recent special guest Colonel retired George Bud Day, the most highly decorated flyer in American history, and to have the opportunity to call in and talk with him is something else again. It's the stuff of which great radio is made, and I do want to add that I think tonight's program is developing into one of our best shows. We have a very distinguished panel with us this evening. The topic is related to the Vietnam experience, kind of an analysis, if you will, devoted to education and reconciliation about the Vietnam experience. Was it a war? Was it a conflict? What was it exactly? Our panelists are college professors, very knowledgeable in the field, as well as Vietnam vets themselves. If you have a question or if you have a comment, please feel free to call us toll free at 866-928-2329. If your question is such that we can bring it to the attention of the panel, we can get an answer for you immediately and perhaps even get you on the air. Or if you'd like to check out our discussion board, you can send your question in via email, and our chat master, Mark Eli, will field that question and bring it to the attention of the panelists. So stay with us here on the Veterans Radio Hour and listen to tonight's show. And if you'd like to access any of our previous shows, be aware that they are available right on the archive. We've been broadcasting since last September and have had a series of more than 30 programs on many different topics, from current matters to historical matters, just a very wide range. Our first program back on September 8th was dedicated to our veterans, honoring our veterans. The second program on the 15th of September, which is also available on the website, was devoted to POW MIA Recognition Day. We had a program about today's military training. We had recently, about 2 weeks ago, a program on the subject of the rebuilding of antique military aircraft, and we had a group of panelists who are doing exactly that. We had a program on the Department of Veterans Affairs, memories of those who served. The list goes on and on. So stay with us, and the program will continue in just a moment.
Who the hell are you?
I'm a reporter, sir. Joe Galloway, UPI. How's it going, Colonel?
Well, we've been flat to the board since last night. We're greatly outnumbered. Well, I can't guarantee your safety.
Yes, sir, I know.
Welcome back. The Veterans Radio Show now continues on the Veterans Radio Network.
The Veterans Radio Hour salutes the Active Service Person of the Week, made possible through the support of Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer. As they say, PBR me, ASAP. Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer, available at your local retail outlet.
Today's Active Duty Service Person of the Week is aboard the USS Kitty Hawk. Whether they're fixing a holster or scrambling for a radio, parachute riggers can be a pilot's best friend. Petty Officer 3rd Class Robert Humphrey passes a bracket for night vision goggles to one pilot while adjusting the pistol holster for another. "Have a good flight, sir," Humphrey calls out at the pilots head toward their FA-18 Hornets bound for Iraq. The squadron parachute rigger shop is the last stop for the aircrew members before they walk out to the flight deck. Humphrey and his crewmates live by the parachute rigger's motto, "The last to let you down." PRs, as they're called, don't just install parachutes and ejection seats. They make sure aircrew members properly don survival gear that isn't expired, broken, or damaged, and they make sure their pilots come back.
You're tuned to the Veterans Radio Hour with retired General Dave Grange, coming to you from the Veterans Center studio. And now, back to the show.
It's Kenny DeCamp sitting in for General Dave tonight, along with Kevin Matthews, a radio personality from WCKG Chicago here. And we're talking about CERSE, about the Center for Reconciliation in Southeast Asia. And Dr. Larry's the man who teaches the literature part of the reconciliation education, primarily having to do with the Vietnam War, but and now incorporating, I believe, all the Southeast Asian nations to try to find peaceful ways of getting together. But you just heard a clip from We Were Soldiers. Is that one of the books that is part of your literature group?
That's one of the books that I often include in my course. It's really an important book for a lot of reasons. That was one of the key battles of the war, which I'm sure Jim can address better than I can. But more importantly, I think, because it's one of those books that doesn't just tell a history of the battle. It doesn't just tell the story of the battle. It looks at what happened to those soldiers and their families after that battle took place. And that's one of the unique things about that book and why it's a really important book, because it helps overcome that myth about that we get in through the media, that wars have these nice, neat little beginnings and these nice, neat little endings where everybody goes home happy and it's all over.
You're talking about precision bullets and precision bombs?
Yeah.
Well, Bob, you had mentioned also, too, that there's a book inside you, and I really do hope that you write that book. One of the most treasured documents that I own was written by my dad, who just wrote down on a legal pad, then my mom on a typewriter typed it up, and his time flying over Germany. And to this day, I thank him for that. And I really, it's so educational. It's such a healing for me to actually know what my uncle did. My nephew right now is with the Mountain Division, it raided the Baghdad airport, So to all the men and women right now that are listening, that have served, that are serving, Kevin Matthews, I cannot pray enough for you people. I can't thank you enough. You're in my prayers, and my family truly loves you. So I am so proud to be here tonight.
I just visited my alma mater this week and had a chance to do a lecture and then a kind of a gathering where people who wanted to come back would have another chance to take a shot at me. And I can tell you that there are schools where it isn't studied, but people still are very upset about the war. And the thing that I think that would be good to do would be to see more and more Southeast Asian studies, possibly even studies of the Vietnam War, because there's a lot to learn. Mm-hmm. Now, what you find, though, is a lot of professors don't want to go back through the political baggage because their own political bent will be disturbed. But I had a chance to set things right with a bunch of students and professors, and showed how we in the Army, anyway, have grown from Vietnam. And in fact, having learned what we learned there, it's possible to say that the road to Baghdad passes through not only Vietnam, but also Mogadishu, Sarajevo, Pristina, and Kabul. And those things, although we didn't like to do them, have been helpful, and I believe we'd be in the current situation whether we'd been to Vietnam or not.
I can't agree with you more on that. One of the things that we tell our class is that you cannot talk about the American component to the Vietnam War until you deal with the First Indochina War. And you can't talk about the First Indochina War unless you know something about Vietnamese society. And you can't know something about Vietnamese society and the First Indochina War without dealing with the Cold War. You set everything in context before you can even start to deal with all the tremendous controversies of Vietnam. And that it's fundamentally critical when you're dealing with Vietnam not to substitute your own single voice to speak for any particular group. I don't speak for veterans. I don't speak for all academics. I have a particular point of view, and all our guests, we bring in anti-war speakers, we bring in nurses, we bring in other veterans, and we try to show them the whole kaleidoscope of what took place during those war years.
Well, then let's talk about a little bit of what I've recently read about the embedded reporters. We just had Joe Galloway, who we had here on our show, and had an incredible time with him. But the subject that I've picked up on was, in Vietnam, certain reporters, cameramen, movie guys, they sort of embedded themselves with the troops. They got in, they did, and they reported, and a lot of came out of what certain military people did not want to hear. Too much got back to the people, they say. That's why some people are claiming today, and I like your opinions, gentlemen, Iraq, is it an embedded reporter or is it in bed with reporter? You're all making
I'll
faces.
start it. Why not? I'm not a big fan of the media, period. I'm not a big fan of the media in the Vietnam War because a lot of those people made their careers on the bodies of our friends. I don't know how more blunt I need to be, but that's about as blunt as it's going to get, and bragged about it. At the same time, in a democracy, when a democracy fights a war, the people have a right to watch it and follow it and pay attention to it. So you've got a dichotomy here. You've got a list of problems that go along with this. Embedding reporters with line units in the present tense is a good idea. It's a good idea because the reporter is not an outsider slipping in on the first lift ship in the morning and going out with the 4 o'clock mail run. He's part of it. He's dirty like you are. He smells as bad as you do. He's ugly. He's tired. He's one of you, whether he likes it or not. And pretty soon, he's got to tell the truth because the truth is all around him. A lot of people, a lot of civilians that I have talked to in the last couple of weeks are very upset about this because they think the reporters are going to come to like the military. Kind of like we shouldn't like our military because they do the dirty business we need them to do. I don't understand that. In any event, I think it's a good idea because in Vietnam, the reporter had no responsibility to the soldiers he was with. If anything, he looked down on them, he abused them, and he used their lives as a process to make his own career.
Come on, you guys are shaking your head. Jump on that.
We don't agree, but you go ahead. Well, actually, let me just do one.
What do you mean you don't agree?
Let's start. I want to just talk about one reporter from Vietnam, Michael Hare, who was also the screenwriter for Apocalypse Now and for Full Metal Jacket. There is a writer that told the truth. He was and I think what was different about him and what's different, it was different about him and the embedded reporters we have right now, is an embedded reporter is with a single unit, and what he sees is he sees the war. There you go. That's it. He can only see a tiny, tiny piece of the war.
Yeah, but Larry, there's 700 of them embedded. That's a lot of people doing a lot of reporting over the whole kit and caboodle.
But they're saying in bed with because they're only getting it from 3 sources. Yeah. They're being fed what needs to be said.
It seems to me that a firefight is a firefight whether you're coming from Al Jazeera or CNN or wherever.
Do you enjoy watching retired military as opposed to, would you rather be with Oliver North or Geraldo Rivera? I mean, as veterans, who would you rather be? And do you think television is taking a good opportunity to actually bring in people?
Well, here we'd all rather be with General Dave. He's the military.
But I mean, or whoever. I'm just that example, for instance.
Well, I think what bothers me about the embedded reporters is that, as one of the generals said, and I can't remember which one, and I think he made a good point, where he said we're actually only seeing about 10% of what's really going on in the war. And that's a problem. There wasn't one embedded reporter with the special forces that were operating in the north, and that's what I would have liked to have known, what was going on up in the north early in the war. We got nothing about that. So when you're just getting a piece of the war, a tiny piece of the war, my fear is that we're not getting a very good picture of what's really going on.
Well, in reconciliation of Southeast Asia, how much, if we got 10% of Iraq, how much were we getting, do you feel, across the board from the Vietnam War?
Well, I think that some reporters did it. I'm going to let Jim's going to take over here. Some reporters, like Michael Hare, went out with the troops and also went to the 5 o'clock follies and listened to the tales of bull that was being handed out, and then tried to sift through that and say, here's the real story. Others just attended the 5 o'clock follies and then wrote their stories and then went out and got drunk in downtown Saigon. And so I think that there were some good things and some bad things about Vietnam, the way the reporters did it. Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I think there's a couple things you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about the role of reporters in Vietnam. And one thing you have to keep in mind is that the media in, say, 1962 and 1963 is not the same as the media in 1972. As the Army develops or disintegrates, whatever your point of view is, from 63 to 72, 73, 74, 75, the media has its own dynamic in terms of how it's operating. I think if you look at the documentary record, you're going to find that in the early years of the war, the media is actually supportive of the war. What they're highly, highly critical about is how the war is being fought. Now that undergoes a fundamental change once you get to 1965 and you get the introduction of ground combat troops, and then you get a different dynamic that takes place.
And also, if you read the New York Times last week, CNN admitted that they would not report the atrocities of Saddam Hussein. And now you have a network like that, and I'm in the media, and I know what it's like to have a boss say, don't talk about the military. You're too pro this. You're too pro military. So I think you can review the whole dynamic of the media after this. They're going to have to be held accountable. They really are.
One quick thought. 12 wars, each war 1 year long. Not one war, 12 years long. Change, evolution, devolution, extremely important.
Yes, it is.
The thing that we have to remember, too, though, about talking about the special forces and embedded journalists is they had embedded journalists in Afghanistan, but they were not satellite journalists. The same technology that gives us the smart weapons also means that someone can file a dispatch instantaneously. You can't have that in a classified op. It'll come out later.
You're listening to the VeteransRadioHour.com if you want to get on with us and get into the chat.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network.
This is the Veterans Radio Hour for April 13th, 2003. It's our 32nd show. Veterans Radio Hour is on every Sunday evening between 8 and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. We encourage you to listen in every week, and also you can access our previous programs right here on the Veterans Radio Hour website. Tonight's program is, I think, a very interesting and lively one on the subject of education and reconciliation about the Vietnam experience. We have a distinguished panel with us of university professors and teachers with direct personal experience as Vietnam veterans. They're involved in a unique organization called CERSI, the Center for Education and Reconciliation in Southeast Asia. And we have quite an interesting discussion and a very informative one going on right now between these gentlemen. On the second half of the program, we'll be joined by several students who will be participating in the discussion. Sam Schottenstein, a political science and history major, and the originator of an idea to film a documentary about instructors and a Vietnam War class at Brask College. And also, let's see who we have. Mr. Mulvihill, who is a history major and is presently directing a documentary now being made on the subject of a Vietnam class at Brask College. So stay with us here on the Veterans Radio Hour. If you have a question and you'd like to call in with it, we have a toll-free number, 866-928-2329. If you'd like details about sponsoring the program or becoming a founder of the Veterans Radio Hour, you can reach the business office toll-free at 800-521-0020. I want to mention also that Kevin Matthews, a radio personality of WCKG 105.9 FM, is hosting the program this evening with Kenny DeCamp, senior producer. General Dave Grange, as you all know, who is our regular host, is away on TDY with CNN. We hope to have him back soon, and we also hope that he might be calling in later. So stay with us here on the Veterans Radio Hour, and we'll be coming back on the air very shortly. Thank you.
The best in military talk radio now continues with the Veterans Radio Show.
This is Kenny DeCamp sitting in for General Dave. We're here tonight talking about the Center for Education and Reconciliation in Southeast Asia, and we're drawing some comparisons to what's even happening today. We're joined by Dr. James Brask. He's the professor up at Barra College, DePaul University. He teaches politics and histories of the Vietnam War. Rob Arnott, just about to get his PhD. He's the associate director of the center. He also teaches politics and history. And Dr. Larry Johansson, he's at Northern Illinois University. He's part of the literature looking group of the center. And we're also here tonight with Kevin Matthews, a radio personality, WCKG 105.9 FM in Chicago. And Kevin, quite a unique little bit of talking here in regards to Southeast Asia, don't you think?
Fascinating, really is. And Larry and Bob and James, your pursuit on the classroom instruction and whatnot, and I support you. I'd love to especially give you a call, Larry, and hook up, because I think there's so much history out there that could be on paper in front of students, too, to hear.
And we were talking a little bit about the media and embedded reporters and stuff, and I know Jim wanted to follow back on that. We're also going to, after, in our second hour, be talking about a film that I know is being prepared and made about the center and some of the course structures. But, Jim, what were you going to say about the media?
Well, there was one thing that I didn't get a chance to say, and that is that I disagree with Bob so fundamentally about the role of the media in Vietnam, and we oftentimes argue about this in class. I don't want to repeat that argument here, but I want to at least state my point of view, which was that I thought the media, you have to remember, I'm in Vietnam in 1970. His view is from 1965. In 1970, I thought the media was actually very, very helpful to the American soldier, because I thought the media that went out, the media that I had access to, they were very, very sympathetic. They reported on our problems, what was taking place with us. They covered us very well. So I think it depends on your perspective and your own personal experience, your view towards the media in Vietnam.
I think a lot of people got involved with that media negative in our country, as nightly we were getting a body count. And that is happening a little bit again today. And even though we can't really draw the comparisons with the 58,229 we lost in Vietnam, which I'm sure you know that a little more than 30% of that, 20,000 some of those soldiers, were friendly fire. And in Iraq, if we draw a comparison in any way, we are now dealing with 40% of friendly fire losses. Now, it's sure a much smaller number, but do you think that that effect, people hearing every day the numbers going up and going up, has something to play on the psyche of those that begin to protest?
I've done a lot of research on this, because my doctoral dissertation is on the impact of post-traumatic stress disorder after the war. The longer it lasts for Americans, the more difficult it gets to pursue. It's self-defeating over time, because Americans don't like long wars. Vietnam was the classic example of something that got out of hand and went way too long. Part of that is due to our political leadership. Part of it is due to our lack of understanding of Vietnam's military, Vietnam's history. Part of it has to do with the fact that we are stubborn as a people and don't like to let go of things. And part of it is simply the fact that Americans were so locked in on World War II as how a war ought to be fought and what a war ought to look like, that the Vietnam War just kind of lost all of its usefulness and its meaning very quickly.
I think you've got a situation here also, though, where the public is not only ready to sustain a body count, but they're beginning to realize, just like the Vietnam War is made up of a number of different wars, or the war in Southeast Asia, that we're involved right now begins in about 1972 with the atrocity in Munich after the Olympics. And it's been a series of skirmishes that have cost us a little more, continuing on through Beirut, Khobar Towers, the Cole, Saudi Arabian National Guard, and finally the embassies, which of course we gave a kind of a futile response to, and that they understand that what's being done now is to correct that. So I think that you see that for the first time since the French and Indian, or correction, the War of 1812, we've seen our own homeland attacked by a foreign power, and they're going to sustain a heck of a lot more. So far, the war has gone very well. There have been a lot of overtones of Vietnam, but they've mainly fallen silent with the quickness with which the objectives have been achieved.
Chicken hawk, how about that term? With you talking about political leadership, we felt it a little bit in Vietnam, and now today it seems to be much larger than ever, primarily because we haven't had that many of wars that we can really focus on. So we have a lot of the political leadership that had nothing to do with a war, and some of them, and some they even claim, were AWOL for part of their stint.
Are you talking about the political leadership in the United States in the present? Is that what you're talking about?
And in comparison to where it was in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Or where it wasn't in Vietnam.
Or where it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, if I had anything to say about a perfect world, which of course I don't, the only people who would hold citizenship, run for office, and lead the country would be veterans. Everybody else would have a wonderful life, and not a whole lot would be expected from them in terms of how the country works. They could live and have a good time, but the people who pay for it are the people who ought to run it. And the people who pay for it are us. We've never had a successful political movement in this country based on veterans, and I don't understand why.
And
because a lot of us are pretty bright.
Yeah, you know about the veterans voting block now, don't you? Well, I'll be letting you know more about that as we get on tonight.
You've been reading too much science fiction, Bob.
I have.
Hey, Jim,
Robert A. Heinlein and I would agree completely with that.
Yeah, you're just looking for the prime directive, I would imagine.
But you know, also,
don't laugh, guys.
Again,
this is
I'm on your side.
With me being in the media too, after 9/11, the world changed. This country changed. I am so proud of if we have to do something. We have to do something. I say that on the air. If we don't, we're going to be annihilated. And to watch what's happened in the last 3 weeks, what's happened militarily after 9/11, and you know, the people that do that type of work, God bless them. Same with fire and rescue. Same with police. I agree. Totally, Bob. I say on the air all the time, I'd love politicians to go out and ride with cops and take them for a ride on the west side, you know. But you just do something like that. I totally agree with you. I think there are so many politicians, so many people that just have no clue, including me, on what a cop does until you ride with a cop.
My oldest son is a Chicago fireman. The house that he's in is in the Austin neighborhood at Adams and Lake Street, where I grew up. And every time they go on a call, a Chicago squad car has to go with them to protect them while they put out the house that's burning down.
We're going to be taking a break and coming back, and I got a question already from somebody in Indianapolis for Dr. Brask. Here we go with my friend T.
Tonight's song celebrates the folks that helped rescue our POW and will continue to do the job up north. Fighting soldiers from the sky, fearless men who jump and die, men who mean just what they say, the brave men of the Green Beret, silver wings upon their chest. These are men, America's best. 100 men will test one day, but only 3 with the Green Beret, trained to live off nature's land, trained in combat, hand to hand.
In just a moment, the Veterans Radio Show will assemble in a military fashion right after this quick reload on the Veterans Radio Network.
Wife waits. Her Green Beret has met his fate. He has died for those oppressed, leaving her a last request. Build silver wings on my son's chest. Make him one of America's best. He'll be a man, he'll test one day. Have him win his Green Beret.
When they
stan magran, al nevi fri.
This is the Veterans Radio Hour. It's our 32nd show, April 13th, 2003. I think it's really one of our best shows. A lot of very meaningful discussion, a lot of cross discussion from our excellent panel this evening on the subject of reconciliation over the Vietnam War. We have on the panel this evening Dr. Jim Brask, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Barra College of DePaul, also Bob Arnott, a PhD candidate at the University of Illinois at Chicago, also a teacher, professor, also Dr. Larry Johansson, Associate Professor of English, Northern Illinois University. All of these gentlemen are themselves Vietnam vets, and they teach courses related to that subject in which students can avail themselves of information that they may not be able to obtain from any other source. As was pointed out earlier in the program, many of the Vietnam vets are reluctant to talk about their experiences, even to their loved ones, to the people that are closest to them. So really the only source of information that many young people have is what they are exposed to in their educational experience. And gentlemen such as our panelists this evening, I think, are doing a magnificent thing in informing students based upon their own experience of what the Vietnam experience was and what its significance is. Later on in the show, we're going to be joined by two students who will be discussing the subject. Sam Schottenstein, a political science and history major, originator of an idea to film a documentary about instructors, and a Vietnam War class at Barra College, and also a Mr. Mulvihill, a history major, director of a documentary now being made on teachers and the Vietnam and a Vietnam War study class at Barra College. Veterans Radio Hour is on the air every week between the hours of 8 and 10 p.m. Sunday nights. Our regular host, General Dave Grange, is away on TVY, as he has been for the last 5 or 6 weeks. He may be calling in later in the show, so we'd love to hear from him. But you can, of course, see him on CNN with Wolf Blitzer and some of the other correspondents there. So hello to General Dave, and hope to have you back soon. Let me mention some of the people behind the scenes here at the Veterans Radio Hour. Carl King is engineer and production director. Lambert Matias, studio manager. Mark Eli is our webmaster and chat master. Kenny DeCamp, a senior producer. Joe Seguski, phone moderator. I'm Fred Cutchins, the internet announcer. And of course, Lance Hack was the creator of the Veterans Radio Hour, and he was inspired in this by his dad, Ralph Hack, who served in the China-Burma India Theater during World War II. If you're in the area here right now, you can still come in and join us for the second half of the program and be part of our studio audience. You can reach the studio very simply off of Interstate 355. Get off at the Ogden Avenue exit. Proceed east to the second stoplight, which is Cross Street. Make a left turn, and the first building right there is our studio, Veterans Center Studio, 4340 Cross Street. Ticket is not necessary. Just come on up here. We're on the second level. We'd love to have you here, and you can enjoy the show right here as a member of the studio audience. I'd like to refer our listeners to a website of the 1350 Foundation. That's www.1350foundation.org. The 1350 Foundation is a celebration of America and the American way, dedicated to active and purposeful citizenship. Check out that website. I think you'll find it most interesting. Carla Narowski is the director. She's been a guest on the program. and it's a very worthy website and a worthy cause. Our guests this evening are all associated with CIRSA, the Center for Education and Reconciliation in Southeast Asia. CIRSA is an educational project dedicated to fostering multicultural understanding of the nations in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim, and the historical relationship of the United States with those nations. The center specifically promotes the process of reconciliation and development of peaceful relations by emphasizing the role of education in creating possibilities for mutual understanding and cooperation. The center promotes educational activities which contribute toward personal, interpersonal, and state-to-state reconciliation. The Veterans Radio Hour is a unique theme-based talk show by, for, and about veterans. Join us here each week for a lively and informative roundtable discussion featuring distinguished military and civilian guests. Topics include everything from historical events to contemporary issues of interest to veterans and active service personnel. If you are a veteran, if you know a veteran, if you care about veterans affairs, this show is for you. So join us here every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. The Veterans Radio Hour is brought to you by Dallas Corporation for all your printing needs at dallascorp.com, DALLASCORP.com. Also GIM Productions and Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer. So stay with us, and we will be back on the air in just a few moments for the Veterans Radio Hour Part 2.
Welcome back. The Veterans Radio Show now continues on the Veterans Radio Network.
Yeah, we're being heard across the country on IRN, the independent radio network. Good guys there. And Dr. James Brask, we got a quick chat room that came in at veteransradio.com. It wants to know, please ask Dr. Brask, what is the most moving or significant event that you've ever experienced in your class from a person in Indianapolis?
Well, that's an excellent question. I've got a couple that I can choose from, and I'll just pick one that always comes to mind. We had the great fortune of having a North Vietnamese student who was the daughter of a man and woman who were in the North Vietnamese Army. When she grew up, she came over to the United States, and lo and behold, she shows up in our class on politics and history of the Vietnam War. And in the course of taking this class, at one point in time, she said she had some pictures of her father and her grandfather, and she asked if she could bring them in. I said, oh, yeah, absolutely, bring them in. So she brings in these pictures, and it turns out that her grandfather was a security chief for Ho Chi Minh. So she had pictures of Ho Chi Minh and her grandfather in a variety of situations. It turns out that when her father was born, Ho Chi Minh had held her father. And it was just an incredible experience. It turns out that this young woman, who was a marvelous person, was the best advertisement you could possibly get for reconciling veterans with Vietnam as a nation. She was a young woman whose sole desire was to get an education in the United States, was not seduced, although she was appreciative of what we have here in the United States. She was not seduced by it. She wanted to go back, and she wanted to contribute to the redevelopment of her own country.
That's great, man. And we got some audience members here who asked me to ask you, since we're talking about students, I'm going to bring a couple in. Can anybody come and sit in on a class and audit one of your classes if they like?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We welcome it all the time.
Okay, we're going to have a tour. We're going to put a bus together. We got a whole group out there who want to go with us. Now we're going to be joined by a couple of students here. These guys are the ones who have come up with the idea, and one's going to direct it, of Let's Shoot Teaching Vietnam. Sam Schottenstein, I guess it was your idea. Why don't you get close to that mic? And
can I tell you something before?
Go ahead.
Yes, Sam. You know, I've got to set this up a little bit. Sam,
both of them.
Sam walked into my office one day, and he said he wanted to shoot a film. And I looked at him like, shoot a film of what? And he said, I want to shoot a film of the class. And I thought he was crazy. I didn't know what he was doing. And I said, well, if you want to do it, just go ahead and do it. Sam, you go ahead and tell them the story.
Well, the day I'm sorry. Well, the day I came into Dr. Brask's classroom and asked to shoot the film, basically it all came about through this idea that I had while sitting on the airplane coming back from vacation over that past summer. On the airplane, I was thinking about my experiences with my grandfather and his best friend, and my grandfather happens to be a survivor of the Holocaust, as well as his best friend, a Vietnam veteran. Both happen to sort of find friendship and I guess maybe even some type of bond of reconciliation together to sort of understand both their situations of war through talking with each other. And I just, like, while thinking about that and reading Bernard Fall, I just started thinking, oh, this would make a good idea for a film. And I thought of how much I really liked the class that Dr. Arnold and Dr. Brask taught, that just it worked out.
Then you met David Mulvihill?
Yes.
And David, you're a student up at Barrett as well?
Yeah, I've taken the class a bunch of times, actually. This will be the third time now. And
are you getting like extra credit, or are you just trying to get a PhD in Brask work?
I try and squeeze credit out of him if I can, but no, Sam's idea, when we talked about it, and he talked about it with Dr. Brask and Arnold, we couldn't decide if we were going to do a documentary about them, if we were going to try and the story of their lives and how they came together, or if it was going to be film the class and use it in educational institutions.
So you're using students as well, besides just the three good guys here?
Yeah.
Eventually, what we decided on was, let's make a documentary about reconciliation. I mean, you look around on TV, and this really hit home with Larry and all the things Larry does when Larry comes to class. The issues he brings up in the media and the film about Vietnam, and how the Vietnam veteran is portrayed, and the radical difference between the World War II veteran and the Vietnam veteran, just in the way they're portrayed. And these guys are not that stereotype. And after meeting them, you start to see other Vietnam veterans who are not that stereotype at all. And the film, we realized, comes out of their path towards reconciliation. Larry as well. These are veterans. They're not homeless. They're not drug addicts. They're proactive people. And America having such a hard time with this war, American people, veterans, everybody having such a hard time with this war, there's a progression towards reconciliation, much more tangible than in any other war. And this film uses these two as its subject, but really it's a film about reconciliation on every level, about America coming to terms with it.
And that's these two, meaning Dr. Brask and Bob Arnott, the two directors now of CERSE, that's Center for Education and Reconciliation of Southeast Asia. Where else do you want to take this center, and as opposed to just teaching the course?
Oh, we have a lot of plans. I think our original idea was to raise money for scholarships. We had such a wonderful experience with that Vietnamese woman. We thought she was so desperately poor. It was so hard for her to attend school. We thought we ought to raise money for scholarships. We also have decided that we're going to try to put together a photo exhibit.
Well, not try. You have one now.
Yeah, we have one now.
It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Helped with the help of Jerry Kissix.
Yes, it's a wonderful exhibit. We have to renegotiate some of the photographs that we take on the road, but we would like to put together a road show, take this on the road and take it to other venues, universities, colleges, whatever, and show them. It's a wonderful show because it has a link between the innocence, war, and reconciliation as a total concept.
Exactly. We're talking here with professors and students in regards to reconciliation for Vietnam. We'll be coming right back on the Veterans Radio Hour. We'll have about a 12-minute segment that we want to get into some pertinent information and feelings, not only about reconciliation from Vietnam, but also from today. This is the VeteransRadioHour.com.
Don't eject just yet. The Veterans Radio Show will reassemble after a short reconnoiter on the Veterans Radio Network.
This is the Veterans Radio Hour. It's our 32nd show, April 13th, 2003. We have a very lively program going on tonight on the subject of Vietnam reconciliation. A panel of true experts, university teachers and students with a very personal interest in the subject and a very great knowledge of the subject. All of the panelists are associated with the Center for Education and Reconciliation in Southeast Asia, called CERSI, which is an educational project dedicated to fostering multicultural understanding of the nations in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim, and the historical relationship of the United States with those nations. Also on the panel this evening and acting as co-host is Kevin Matthews, radio personality, along with Kenny DeCamp, senior producer who has been sitting in the host's seat during the absence of General Dave Grange, our regular host, who is away on TVY with CNN. You can see him frequently with his incisive observations from the military perspective on the Iraq War. Let us just for a moment acknowledge military.com, saluting all those who answered the call to our nation's service. Check out that website, military.com. Also, the 1350 Foundation, respectfully honoring the American flag. Their website, 1350foundation.org. We also want to acknowledge a great supporter of the Veterans Radio Hour, Rudy Pimentuan, Chicago's #1 public relations and media strategist with Sherman Consulting. Also, the City of Chicago's Veterans Council. Join us by calling our business office at 800-591-0020. If you're interested in sponsoring the program or becoming a sponsor founder, we'd love to hear from you at that phone number. And if you have a question or a comment, you can call us at 866-928-2329. That's 866-928-2329. We'll be back on the air in just a few moments. Stay with us.
Stand by 10 seconds.
The Veterans Radio Show is clear for a landing. Let's resume our broadcast from the Veterans Center Studio. Here is today's military quote of the day, brought to you by support from retired Lieutenant Commander Adrian Rubinkowski.
Today's quote is a unique one. No event in American history is more misunderstood than the Vietnam War. It was misreported then, and it is misremembered now. This quote was the statement of former President Richard Milhous Nixon, 1985.
You're listening to the Veterans Hour with retired Brigadier General Dave Grange. And now, back to the broadcast.
Dave Grange is out on CNN tonight. So you're sitting here with me, Kenny DeCamp. We're talking about the Center for Education and Reconciliation of Southeast Asia. Who wants to jump on Richard Milhous Nixon's little quote? Anybody have anything to say?
They're all pointing at me, so I guess I'll say a few words. I think it's from his book, No More Vietnams. But I'm not 100% sure because I don't have that in front of me. I'm not sure I agree with him. Media issues, well, we all know how I feel about that. Larry, what do you think? You're the literature guy here.
Yeah.
Did you say it one more time?
Okay, it's no event in American history is more misunderstood than that Vietnam War. It was misreported then, and it is misremembered now.
Well, I think he's right about misremembered. I don't think there's any question about it being misremembered. We're very good at going back, and maybe the best example of all is the Rambo image that we have, in which he goes back to Vietnam and refights the war, and we come out the winners at the end. And I think that's Tim O'Brien, one of the maybe most famous writers about the Vietnam War, said American people like white knights. we don't like to see ourselves as the bad guys. We don't like to see ourselves as having gone somewhere and fought a war and maybe made a mistake. And so there's a tendency for us to rewrite history and to make it something other than it was. And one way that it's really bad, I think, is you look at the literature of the war and the history of the war, where are the Vietnamese? They are almost non-existent.
I'm going to bring something up in just a minute. Call in. Our lines are open, 866-928-2329 if you've got a question. One of our chat room questions, or actually Mark told me about 3 or 4 of them, Mark Eli, our webmaster, said that they want a little bit more information about the photo exhibit. What do you mean by a Vietnamese or a reconciliation photo exhibit?
Well, what we did in this particular photo exhibit was we put together a student committee, Bob, myself, a few other people, and we decided that we would look at a large number of photographs that were in the possession of the National Vietnam Veterans Art Museum. And we developed a theme, and the theme was innocence, war, and reconciliation. So we tried to select photographs that reflected the innocence of soldiers in basic training, just getting used to being in Vietnam, and Vietnamese civilians. And we tried to select photos that represented issues about war. And then we also tried to select some photos that address the issues of reconciliation. For instance, we have some photographs of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and things that are taking place there. So there's actually a connection between all of these photographs in this exhibition because you're taken through innocence, then war, and then to reconciliation.
About how many photos all told?
I think there's about 40 or 50, right? Is that
No,
right,
it's
Bob?
more than that. There's, I think, 66 photos, some 5 or 6 paintings, some sculpture work, and the combination, the way they're laid out is what makes it very special. The people who hung the show, with the assistance of the curator of the museum, the students did a marvelous job. That's about 3/4 of it.
And you know, I think that, and Bob and I have talked about this, one of the real importance of the show is that you don't have to be a Vietnam veteran.
Oh, no, not at all.
You can really relate to this theme.
Arguably, this is not, you know, we are secondary in this. It's education of the public, of our young people, of our older people. We get a lot of people who sit in on our class or talk to us because they've never had any conversation about Vietnam, and they're in their 50s and 60s. All they know is what they read in the paper.
And Sam, doing this film, Teaching Vietnam, do we have this exhibit as part of the film as well, or are you planning it?
Yes, we wanted to go ahead and include that in part of the whole process, and we were hoping that this would also help add some atmosphere to the whole film too, and all this combined basically will help generate a better understanding.
Most
of
definitely. I think even just some good clips and edits of that is going to make a lot of sense. Now, we were talking about Vietnamese a little while ago, and somebody said, but we're forgetting the Vietnamese a lot of times. Let me read to you something that just came up, and I'd like to get some opinion on it. Maybe T will even join in on this one. The Department of State under Colin Powell, our Secretary of State, who I know you guys all respect very well, signaled the communist government of Vietnam that it agrees with that government's desire to prohibit the display of the Republic of South Vietnam's flag anywhere in the United States. Having succeeded so far in getting the Bush administration to prevent the former Republic of Vietnam flag from flying in the state of Virginia, the communist government in Hanoi is now demanding that the state of California prohibit this flag from being flown or displayed in California, all over the state, which has one of the largest Vietnamese immigrant communities. But here's where the point I'm getting to. As you know, the Vietnam Service Medal you wear symbolizes the former South Vietnamese flag. Many veteran warriors proudly wear this, some people daily. So here's the question that pops up. Should this Vietnam War Service Medal, which displays the image of the former Republic of the South Vietnam flag, be revoked? Should it be redesigned? Or should we just say, hey, this is it, this is where we came from? What do you think?
I'm going to talk first on that one, and I'm going to ask General Powell to get his act together. I was going to say something else, but we are on the radio. General Powell, this is Bob Arnold. you can reach me at Barrett College of DePaul University. Where are you thinking? Those people who died under that flag deserve all of our respect. There were about 1 million casualties in South Vietnam. And I wear it on my uniform, and I've got one hanging on my wall in my office, and I'm not taking it down for anybody. Thank you.
And I want to add to that. There's another issue here. The United States, when the Vietnam War ended, we took refugees from Southeast Asia up through the year 2001. We took Southeast Asian refugees. Over 2 million refugees from Southeast Asia came to this country. We welcomed them in this country, saying, please come, be a part of this nation. And now we're going to turn around and kick them in the face and say, but keep your history, your past out of this country? What is the matter with it? Would we say that to the Irish? Would we say that to the Russians?
We're not going to say that to them. We have said it.
Yeah, good point.
Past tense.
Jim, what about you? I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, you know, I don't think the issue is displaying the South Vietnamese flag on the part of private citizens. This is really a diplomatic issue. This is the display of the South Vietnamese flag in official government buildings. And there are some diplomatic issues here which are really difficult to resolve because you can't put the approval of a government entity, you know, be it the national government or state governments, on a non-existent symbol of a country that no longer exists. I mean, we're definitely not talking about private display. Any individual can have a private display of the South Vietnamese flag. Bob made mention of it. I have one of my own, and I display that, and there's no way they can ban that. But it's a much more difficult process when you're talking about government buildings, because that country, whether I like it or not, or whether you like it or not, that government doesn't exist, and it creates diplomatic problems. And what we're looking for is trying to ease tensions between us and Vietnam.
Yes, and I think that the report that you read, Kenny, we'd have to take a look and see exactly how that was signaled and what was the request from Vietnam, and has there been just a delay, which seems to indicate that we agree. And I also agree that you can wear that doggone medal, and I don't think it ought to be redesigned. I mean, what would be the point? If you made it of a flag that didn't exist at that time, it would be a medal that would not have enough background to support it, so we should keep it the way it is. There are a lot of old flags that we hang every once in a while of our own country that are no longer used, but they're historic and they should remain the way they are.
Personally, me and Dave would, and I'm sure Dr. Brask and Dr. Arnold and Dr. Johansson would attest to this, that we personally believe that we should focus more on reconciliation and trying to understand the war, and basically speaking to some of what the quote had said holistically, rather than worrying about technicalities of the flag and issues like that.
Well, the flag is the flag, and the medal is the medal, and it has a lot to do with, as you said, the government versus the private.
There's a lot of symbolism behind Colin Powell's move, I guess. But what about more than symbolic moves? What about real moves? What about reconciliation? You would think Colin Powell would have a little bit more on his plate to worry about than flags of South Vietnam right now.
Well, here's some reconciliation for you then that the communist government in Hanoi just did. Some of you might know the name Don Dung. Okay. Don was the man who played, he's an actor, Vietnam actor, yes, who played the commander in We Were Soldiers. He was the one that lost to Mel Gibson, so to speak, in that movie. And for portraying that character, you probably all know that he was arrested. And I don't know if you know this, he was released just the day they knocked down Saddam Hussein's big statue in the middle of Baghdad. And that's something to really think about now, the symbolism that goes there, and how the communist government does want to do things for the State Department, if the State Department might want to do things for us and for them. We're going to be right back. We're talking about the Center for Education and Reconciliation in Southeast Asia with both professors and students, trying to find out ways that we can reconcile after the war. Vietnam. We'll be right back.
say when. I'm going to go on the second one. Did your wife bring those cookies? Yeah. And this is the Veterans Radio Hour for April 13th, 2003. We're here every Sunday evening between the hours of 8 and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. We urge you to tune in every week and listen to the program. It's something different every week, sometimes historical, sometimes contemporary, but always very interesting. Tonight's program is on the subject of reconciliation over the Vietnam War. We have an excellent panel of university professors and students, all of whom are actively interested in the subject. The professors are themselves Vietnam veterans, and they speak from experience. So this is the kind of programming you'll hear on the I should say, the Veterans Radio Hour. Always interesting, sometimes controversial, but always filled with facts and important information. Veterans Radio Hour is brought to you by Dallas Corporation for all your printing needs at dallascorp.com. Check out their website for the many graphic arts products and services they offer. Also a sponsor is GIM Productions. Websites can do that. See their website at gimproductions.com. Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer, as they say, PBR me ASAP. If you'd like details about sponsoring or becoming a founder of the Veterans Radio Hour, you can reach the business office toll-free at 800-521-0020. That's 800-521-0020. If you have a question or a comment while the show is in progress, call us toll-free at 866-928-2329. That's 866-928-2329. Let me take a moment to acknowledge some very pertinent websites. Military.com, saluting all those who answer the call to our nation's service. The 1350 Foundation at 1350.org. That's spelled out 1350, THIRTEENFIFTY Foundation.org. Respectfully honoring the American flag. And also I want to acknowledge a great supporter of our program, Mr. Rudy Pimentuan, Chicago's #1 public relations and media strategist with Sherman Consulting. We also want to recognize the City of Chicago Veterans Council. Again, our business office number is 800-521-0020. You can send us an email at info@vrh.com. Stay with us. We'll be coming back on the air very shortly for the last approximately 25 minutes of the Veterans Radio Hour.
So your company has a website. We are all familiar with how the web can be used to showcase information. But did you know the web can also be used as a medium to actually do something to help your business? GIM Productions delivers custom web-based technology and applications to meet the needs of your company. We have the experience and the expertise to deliver web applications, e-commerce solutions, and interactive multimedia. GIM Productions can help you in making difficult technology decisions. We work to make web technology work for your company, and we will be there along the way to support you as you grow. Our comprehensive team includes talented programmers, software developers, graphic designers, and network specialists that strive to bring you the best. Contact us at our toll-free number 1-887-256-6914 or email us at info@gimproductions.com. Websites can do that.
The Veterans Radio Show is clear for a landing. Let's resume our broadcast from the Veterans Center studio.
And we're moving on. This is our 32nd program. We're glad you're all with us. I got to thank my partner, Lance Hack, our harder working guy, Lambert Matias. He's here all the time, just one of the good guys. Carl King on the board for us. Fred Cutchins, our web announcer. And good old Joe Zagowski, the man who makes sure those phone calls ring off the hook and get me some of those questions here and there. Mark Eli, of course, our webmaster. Military.com, saluting all those who answered the call of our nation's services. That's military.com. Our good friends with the 1350 Foundation.org, respectfully honoring the American flag and our citizenship. And our Veterans Radio Hour supporters who have been with us all the time, Lieutenant Commander Adrian, who's with us, Rubenkowski, she's a good person, and our good new one, Rudy, Pam Antoine. He's Chicago's #1 public relations and media strategist with Sherman Consulting. We also recognize the City of Chicago and the Veterans Council, who's given us and aided us in a lot of different ways. And I'm going to tell you we're going to be on an Easter hiatus next week, so there'll be some form of a reproduction or a replay or a reprogram going on. We'll be going on hiatus for a little bit of time. Check with our website. We'll find out more as time goes on. Now that we're back, guys, we're talking about the Center for Reconciliation and Education in Southeast Asia. And I'm here with a couple of professors and some students based on that. I'm going to bring up one little subject to see what you guys think of. In relationship to your program, I've been asked to find out about your guest speakers. For instance, I've got some Vietnam background, mostly taking care of the 3,850-some casualties that came through my clinic in Zama, Japan, about 2 years after Jim was there. And it was pretty intense for me, 21-year-old guy, taken out of pre-med, given a quick crash course. Next thing I know, I'm amputating, or I'm trying to put back together. I'm creating things that were kind of unique and strange for me, and at the same time, my younger brother all of a sudden now is being shipped into Vietnam, working on helicopters, spraying Agent Orange. He is represented at the National Vietnam Veterans Art Museum as the Black Dog Tag. He died from an Agent Orange skin disease that, of course, back in the mid-'80s, there was no such thing as an Agent Orange skin disease. Mm-hmm. Still going through some of that complications with his two sons. But anyway, tell me about some of the speakers. Would I even be able to represent myself there, and would it make any sense, or would I just talk too much?
Oh, you probably would talk too much, but you're welcome nonetheless. We welcome all viewpoints regardless of how much you talk. I think speakers are a fundamentally important part of the course, because what you get with speakers is you get a different representation of the realities that have been experienced. Vietnam or any war, the Persian Gulf War, the current war that's going on, is a tremendous diversity of experiences. You can never possibly cover all those experiences, so what you do is try to cover some of them. You bring in guest speakers. One of the guest speakers we bring in has been very gracious, and she's sometimes controversial to those who know her, is Bernadine Dorn. We were very, very fortunate to...
Wait, Bernadine Dorn, the weatherman person?
Yes, the Weatherman faction, the Students for Democratic Society on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. We happened to meet her, Bob and myself did. We were very fortunate to be invited to do a PBS program, local PBS, WTTW out of Chicago, and Bernadine Dorn was a surprise to us. She was a guest on the same program, and I must say that the interaction with Bob and Bernadine was fun to watch.
And they're still dating?
Actually, it's become relatively civilized at this point.
And, you know, there's one, Bob, I'll turn this over to Bob in a second. He can give you his impressions. I'm not going to try to explain what he was doing with Bernadine on the program. But one thing I do want to mention is that after this program was over, this clash took place between Bernadine and Bob. Bernadine said that one of the things that needs to be done is for everybody that's involved in this war to sit down and talk. The anti-war protesters, the mothers of servicemen, the servicemen themselves. And I remember very specifically her mentioning this word about reconciliation. And that is really what stuck in my mind. And constantly played it over, and I think that's one of the reasons why we have a center that embodies that work. Bob, now you can address what happened on the show.
Well, we were asked on the show to talk about issues around the 25th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. And this was in May of 2000, I believe it was, yes. And she was a surprise guest to us. We met her. I was very uncomfortable at first because this was the enemy. This was the enemy that I knew when I got back here. And Jim, I think, was a little more comfortable. In any event, we got in the program. Some things were said. All of us kept our cool. Nobody threw anything at anybody else. But I think it was a good show. People listened. People liked what they heard. There was a lot of honest talk. And I was frankly surprised that she dealt with us the way she did. She was not hostile. She was not the arrogant anti-war demonstrator, well-educated and condescending that I had seen when she was younger and when I was younger. So to make a long story short, after the show, as Jim said, we met, we talked. We ended up inviting her to come up to our class. She came up, she spoke. She's been in 3 classes now, I believe, 4. And Jim and I had dinner at her house last year, met her husband, another guy whose name might ring a bell with some of you, Bill Ayers, one of the leaders of the, 1968 Democratic Convention.
You know, one of the, I think the important things about her, though, that she just spoke in my class a couple of weeks ago at Northern. And I think it's important to understand that one of the things that happened during the Vietnam War that made the war so contentious is that people stopped listening to one another.
Yes.
And this is a
Agreed.
democracy. We have to listen to one another.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that she has helped us realize, at least for me, is that if we're going to come to understand this war, if we're truly going to achieve reconciliation, we can't let one viewpoint dominate. We have to open our ears and listen to everybody that has a piece of the truth.
So that definitely applies to the war that's going on right now.
Agreed.
You know, that's not just Vietnam.
I don't think
About
it's
current
just
war.
Vietnam, it's any war. There's always 2 sides to the argument.
Well, then we get to the next question I'd like to bring up to you. Can democracy be imposed through invasion, occupation, saying that we're doing the right thing to make the world a better place for some protesters are saying for the selected few?
The short answer is no. It cannot be imposed. It can be nurtured. It can be brought along. It can be encouraged, but it cannot be imposed.
Did we try to impose a democracy on Vietnam?
I believe so.
Did we occupy Vietnam?
Yes. Yes.
No, I'm sorry. We did not occupy Vietnam. We were not imperialists.
Oh,
We
no,
were not conquerors.
Zim didn't even know American troops were in the country.
Until we arrived.
Yeah.
I know that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I guess that's not occupation.
No,
I guess it's
no.
just they decided to visit for a little
The
while.
rules were different.
Yeah.
You know that these were Marines we're talking
The
about
rules
also.
were different. It was still an independent country. Don't you think we had the responsibility to
We
alert
did.
them that we were sending troops? Yeah, after
We
the
did,
fact.
but if we considered our Vietnamese allies as colleagues instead of less than that, then we probably would have done that. Vietnam is a series of mistakes. The key, again, is to talk about them, and for you and I to disagree as much as we do, because then other people will learn from our disagreements. You are a pain in the neck, Dr. Brask. But I love you because you're my friend.
You know, can I say from a student's point of view, this is it. This is that class. You know, you can take history classes. You can learn about wars. You can learn about mistakes made, but you can't have this. You know what these two, the polar opposites that they are the engine that drives this class. You know, people take the class because they need a history credit, but they end up leaving with a class they'll never forget. It's well beyond learning in the traditional sense.
Here's a chat room question. What happened to the issue of Vietnam as a conflict or a war? What happened to that issue, and how does your center relate to it?
Well, you know, I think to go back and talk about the difference between a conflict and a war is fundamentally important with respect to how you approach the war politically. I mean, we never dodge political questions when we deal with things like the Tonkin Gulf Resolution as being a substitute for a declaration of war. That's absolutely current because it relates to the 1991 Gulf War and the way we approached it in Congress. It relates to the current war in Iraq. It relates to the nurturing of public support to avoid the possibility of driving a wedge between the public and the military in the field.
But we do know that according to Congress and the veterans' rights, that the term war and war being declared by Congress is different for a veteran than if it's a war that's not declared by Congress. You're aware of that as a veteran.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And with all the things that are going down for veterans right now, it's probably something that we're going to have to be examining more and more, and that's why I believe this Veterans Radio Hour is really important. One quick question we have here for the student. You got about 30 seconds to tell me what's your agenda? What do you want to prove with this film?
You know, again, it goes back to the stereotype of the Vietnam veteran. The only veteran looked at differently than the rest of the veterans in American history. Every day as we speak, we're creating more veterans. You know, things are happening again as they did in the 60s and 70s. They can't be ignored. People support. People are out every day wearing pins, support the troops, and everybody says, well, of course I support the troops. I'm against the war, but I support the troops, and I don't understand that. But the reality is, not too long ago at all, there was a point in American history where you didn't support the troops. People didn't support the troops. It seems obvious to my generation, but your generation remembers something completely different.
Yeah, and we've got people saying that this isn't really a war. This is bringing democracy to a nation that needs democracy from a dictator.
To quote the Bard, a rose by any other name is still a rose.
That's right. And we're going to be back in a little while with our rose keepers here. This is Kenny DeCamp at the Veterans Radio Hour. Back in a few minutes.
Stay tuned. The Veterans Radio Show will continue on the Veterans Radio Network.
This is the Veterans Radio Hour for April 13th, 2002. We're coming into our last segment here, the last few minutes, so stay with us. Veterans Radio Hour is hosted by Brigadier General Dave Grange, who is away on TDY, as he's been for several weeks, with CNN. In his absence, the program is hosted this evening by Kenny DeCamp, senior producer, and also Kevin Matthews, radio celebrity, with a very great interest in the subject matter this evening, which is the Vietnam War experience. Veterans Radio Hour is a theme-based talk show by, for, and about veterans. Join us here each week for a lively and informative roundtable discussion featuring distinguished military and civilian guests. Topics include everything from historical events to contemporary issues of interest to veterans and active service personnel. To read a book or to watch a movie about World War II or the Vietnam War is always interesting. But to hear an interview with an actual participant, such as our panel guest this evening, or a recent special guest, Colonel retired George Bud Day, the most highly decorated flyer in American history, and to have the opportunity to call in and talk with him is something else again. It's the stuff of which great radio is made. If you are a veteran, if you know a veteran, if you care about veterans affairs, this is a show for you. So stay with us here for our concluding portion of the program, and tune in every week between 8 and 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Let me just take one moment and mention some of the people behind the scenes who make the program possible each week, such as Carl King, the engineer and production director, Lambert Matias, studio manager, Mark Eli, webmaster, Kenny DeCamp, of course, senior producer, Joe Seguski, phone moderator. I'm Fred Cutchins, the internet announcer, and let me mention again that the Veterans Radio Hour was created by Lance Hack. He was inspired in this by his dad, Ralph Hack, who served in the China-Burma India Theater during World War II. If you have a question, there still is time to call in. You can call in at 866-928-2329. That's 866-928-2329. I'll repeat that once more, 866-928-2329. And don't forget to check out the discussion board on the Veterans Radio Hour website right here. We shall be joined very shortly here toward the end of the show by Mark DeMin, our vocalist who's going to do a number or two for us, and I think that's how we're going to sign off tonight. So stay where you are. We'll be back on the air very shortly for the concluding portion of the Veterans Radio Hour.
Welcome back. The Veterans Radio Show now continues on the Veterans Radio Network.
All right, we're back, and we got one quick question here from my friend T. Get on it.
Yeah, would you eminent scholars have an opinion on the following question? Did, in fact, Johnson invoking the draft for college people, no more deferments, have an effect on campus? And then secondly, did Walter Cronkite pronouncing Tet, North Vietnamese victory and a U.S. failure, have an effect on the overall strategic outcome of the war?
We need 30 seconds. There you go, Larry.
I'm just going to deal with Cronkite's statement. I think it was certainly a turning point in the war, and that's a really good question, whether or not it made any difference. I think it certainly turned public opinion. It was what turned public opinion against the war.
Yeah, you can't talk about the college part because you enlisted at 17. Right? Dr. James.
The effect of Tet is really not any enormous change on American public opinion. That's been shown by polls that have been done. The effect of Tet was on elite public opinion. And when you had elite public opinion leaders who suddenly started to question taking their lead from Walter Cronkite in that sense, then you did have a turning point.
Not media again, Bob.
Walter Cronkite is an example of how the American media wields way too much power. Cronkite got up in front of 40 million people and made a personal comment based on his time in country. And a lot of people thought that since he knew what he was doing on other things, he knew what he was doing here. Whether or not the end result would have changed, I don't know, but he was way out of line.
And anything about the college draft idea? Do you think it made changes happen?
Oh, did the fact that they actually drafted during the Vietnam War? Yeah, absolutely. It's a fundamental dynamic, the institution of the draft during the Vietnam War, and the fact that the draft, as one author put it, is a working class draft.
Sure, but my point would be that at one point later in the war, in order to bring in a more relative representation of American society, Johnson revoked the deferments for students.
Oh, I see.
And this meant that if you were in college thinking that you were safe, the next place you could show up and be safe would be Canada. And so I think that really added a lot to what went on campus.
Or Oxford. I think somebody famous went to Oxford.
Well, Oxford by way of Moscow.
Bill somebody. I didn't get the whole name.
The real issue today is we've got less than 1% of people in any kind of uniform, reserve or active. That's about as many as you've got farming. So when we talk about chicken hawks, we might as well talk about chicken farmers. It's difficult for anyone to serve today.
Yeah.
And that'll have an effect later on when we say we want veterans running the country. I mean, veterans of what? In fact, we better start thinking that veterans are those people that may work for Homeland Security and other places, because they're probably just as important to our survival as some of the folks that we have today on the front lines in uniform. And many of those people will go to these other departments, too.
Larry, why don't you, we're going to have to start winding down. We're going to go around the table a little bit. Give us about a 30-second summary of what you think, what you're doing, literature-wise, Cersei, et cetera.
Well, I think one of the really important things that's going on now with literature, the literature of the war, is that there's more and more literature coming out of Vietnam. And when you look at the literature that's coming out of Vietnam and compare it to the literature that's being written by that has been written and is being written by American authors, what you see are some common themes. And some of those common themes are, we need to reconcile from the war. It doesn't help us to continue the war across 10,000 miles.
And Sam, what do you think, our student film creator here?
I think it's really important to emphasize reconciliation with even the students, so that maybe we could better understand what's currently going on today. And for me, the main reason why I even had came up with this really is I just remember seeing the dynamic between Dr. Brask and Dr. Arnold, and it reminded me so much of the days between my grandfather and his friend who was a Vietnam veteran. And I think that dialogue is so important to understand any political event, let alone something like
That's
Iraq.
right. And David, now our other student from Bear College, DePaul University.
You know, Bob and Jim are inspirational to a lot of people who have taken the class, and this film is not a project of theirs. This isn't their idea. The project is a student idea about them. Believe me, they've been against it every step of the way.
Well, that's one thing I like about them. They seem to really get the students involved, and that's really hot. Bob, give us what your feelings are in Cersei.
Reconciliation starts with the individual, and I guess one word to my fellow Vietnam vets all over the place: let go of the war. Let go of it as a personal thing for you. Let the truth in so we can all rest easy and give our children a better world.
Very good, Jim.
I want to address something I think is a fundamental purpose of teaching a class like Politics and History of the Vietnam War. And I think that ultimately, when all is said and done and students leave, they're going to forget a lot of the facts that you teach them. They're going to forget a lot of the events. I think what they can walk out with is, if you're honest with them and truly open up your heart to them, is that they can learn something about veterans. And what they can learn from veterans is that they're individuals who experience tragedy, and that in the experiencing of this tragedy, they found ways to survive and cultivate their life to a different level. And I think that's something that can really impact an individual person as they look back on it. And that's an incredible thing to teach in a college class.
Great. Big Steve out in Washington, you got 30 seconds on Vietnam. What do you think?
All right, Ken, I'm glad you at least called me or let me say my piece.
Let's
my
go.
friend
Do
who
it.
waited on to get on the show.
Let's
I just
go.
could
Do
not
it.
get back on. Gunny Brandon, a good friend of mine, 2nd Bat, 4th Marines, magnificent bastards. Went back to Vietnam 2 years ago, and they confronted the Colonel Van Dow or something, who fought the Marines at a place called Dai Du, and met with him, had a good report. He said very good talk about the Marines that fought him. He thought they were the greatest fighters.
And they sure were, Steve.
Hey,
Thanks
listen,
for calling on. We'll be back in a little while. We've got to end this show out. We normally try to lose our show at the end of the night with something that we feel significant. This is a song from 1965 when our first troops went into Vietnam, and it's a song that probably has a lot of meaning today as well. I think Frank Sinatra did this one. Here's our own Veterans Radio Hour singer, Mark DeMin, the Velvet vocalist.
I'm gonna love you like nobody's loved you, come rain or come shine. High as a mountain and deep as a river, come rain or come shine. I guess when you met me, it was just one of those things. But don't you...
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the Veterans Radio Hour. Join us next week for more great military talk radio, one of our best of shows being played for you on the Veterans Radio Hour. This is Carl King live from the Veterans Center studio. Roger Wilco, over and night. Good night, all.
Nobody's loved me, come rain or come shine. Now,
It's never on there. Okay, here we go.
the days may be cloudy or sunny. We're in or we're out but I'm with you always. I'm with you, rain or shine.
Don't clap now. There's still more to come.
Days may be cloudy or sunny. We're in or we're out of the money. But I'm with you, baby. I'm with you, rain or shine.
All right, you can clap now.
Hey. Mr. Mark the Men, ladies
and gentlemen. Good night, everyone. Good night.
From the Veterans Radio Hour.
I'm going to kill it.
So we got tuned up. This is dedicated to those people again who did the rescuing, the Ghost Riders in the Sky. Cowboy went riding out one dark and stormy day. Upon a ridge he rested as he went along his way. When all at once a mighty herd of red-eyed cows he saw, plowing through the ragged skies and up a cloudy draw. Eyes were still on fire and their hooves were made of steel. Their horns were black and shiny and their hot breath he could feel. trembled when fear went through him as he stared up in the sky. For he saw the riders coming hard, and he heard their mournful cry. Yippee-yi-ho, yippee-yi. Ghost riders in the sky. Their faces gaunt, their eyes were red, their shirts all soaked with sweat. They're riding hard to catch that herd, but they ain't caught 'em yet. They got to ride forever on that crane up in the sky. On horses snorting fire, as they ride on, hear their cry. Yippee-yi-ho, yippee-yi-ho.